My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates.
Forrest Gump's answer to the meaning of life, the universe, and everything isn't something he figured out. It's something he was born with. It's the way his mind approached his experiences. The question of what is the meaning of life has started a conversation that has gone on for thousands of years. We want to know what our purpose is. What does it mean to live a good life? Does what we do now affect eternity in some way? Does our life play some meaningful role in the grand scale of the universe?
Brothers! What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Or is it like what the writer of Ecclesiastes says? Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, a mere chasing after the wind. Forrest Gump didn't contemplate any of these questions, but rather he lived his answer to them. And to me, there's much more insight there than most of the conversation on the topic.
Now, you wouldn't believe it if I told you that I could run like the wind blows.
And yes, it's just a movie, but there's truth buried inside of it, which is why it resonates with you when you watch it. If you follow the principles that he lived his life by, you probably won't meet the president, but you will stumble into success like he did. But before I talk about the principles he lived his life by, I want to make a point about experience. So experience isn't something that you can easily quantify. It's not something that lends itself to being rigidly categorized. It's something amorphous that resists definition. A way to see this in action is to think about color, right? So we have the primary colors, red, blue, green. And we learn in school that these are the primary colors because they can't be made by any other color. When they're added together equally, they make white, and they can make every color on the color wheel. But that's not exactly true. Yes, when they're added together equally, they do make white, and they can't be made by any other color on the color wheel, but they can only make the colors that are between them. This triangle represents the colors that can be made by the three primary colors. But if we rotate this triangle, we could have three different primary colors that could make the same amount of colors between them, just slightly different colors. And any of these other three primary colors, when equally added together, would also make white. So why do we have the primary colors that we have? It's because we don't actually see the entire color wheel. This is what we actually see. And it's because we have these light-sensitive cones in our eyes, and we have three different categories of them. Each category of cone is most sensitive to either red, blue, or green. And so we have the primary colors we have because it's a logical system that is the closest approximation to our actual experience. In the same way, any set of principles you use to try to capture the essence of someone's experience is at best going to be the closest approximation to what it's like to be them.
I think they think it was fascinating. I think it's fascinating.
So what are the principles that Forrest Gump lived his life by? Coincidentally, there's going to be three principles, like the three primary colors. So principle number 1, let's call it red. And this is his givenness to his experience. And everything that he did it with all of his energy. He was never distracted with the future, worrying about what comes next, wishing he was somewhere else. Whenever he committed himself to a task, he would just keep at that until he got good at it, right? In the movie, he starts playing ping pong, and he just plays for hours and hours and hours and hours, and then he becomes like a world champion. And that is what it takes to get good at something. Life is like a video game, except unlike a video game, it doesn't have multiple levels where it gets slightly harder each time and you get to build your skill set. Instead, it just starts at level 200 and that's all you got, right? So like you just keep failing over and over and over until you get good enough to beat level 200. And that's why when you're trying to develop a skill set, it doesn't feel fun like a video game because you just keep failing until you finally get it. And if you don't fully give yourself to the experience and instead start thinking about what you would rather do or even worrying about something that might happen in the future just to distract you from the difficulty that's right in front of you, you will eventually lose your motivation to continue developing that skill set and you'll never master anything. Whereas, if you just choose to give yourself to the experience from the beginning and fully be in it, even in the frustration is actually the thing that causes your brain to learn the new skill. It's a bummer, but you have to feel frustrated to get better at something.
This is a bummer, man.
And if you give yourself to the development of a skill that other people find valuable, you will find yourself an irreplaceable part of a community of people. And regardless of what your answer is to the bigger question of the meaning of life, you will find that you feel your life to be meaningful when you are an irreplaceable part of a community.
Yeah. I don't know if Mama was right or if it's Lieutenant Dan. I don't know if we each have a destiny or if we're all just floating around accidental like on a breeze. But I think maybe it's both.
Principle number 2. This one will be blue. He did not try to control the circumstances or the outcome of what he was giving himself to. He just put in the effort. In the movie, there's this visual metaphor of a feather blowing in the wind, and that is a great metaphor for how he lived his life. He didn't try to resist what was coming down the pike. He just went with the flow, and it worked out for him. Which you might be really skeptical, like, that's not actually how it works. I gotta worry about the outcome, otherwise I'm gonna go a bad direction. But the thing is, everything gets distorted when you worry about what the outcome of what you're doing will be. For example, me making this video. I really enjoy making these videos, even though they're difficult. They're super difficult. But if I started caring more about how they were received and how many views and likes they got, it would move my motivation from being something internal, from this being something that I'm doing to express ideas that I have, to something external where it's something I'm doing because I'm trying to get attention from others. And I'm definitely going to stop at some point if that shifted in my motivation, because it just feels draining to try to get attention from others, but to do something creative where you're expressing ideas you have is so much more motivational, right? And so trying to control the outcome in pretty much any circumstance in life always ends up distorting your own motivations, which then causes you to end up quitting the thing that you're trying to pursue. This kind of thing happens all the time in relationships, where one person will try to control the other person to avoid an outcome they don't want, but like that Chinese proverb that was quoted in Kung Fu Panda, Master Oogway says, "One often meets his destiny on the road he takes to avoid it." Now that's positive because destiny is like a good thing, but that also works in the negative, where the thing you're trying to avoid, you end up hitting because you're looking at it. I heard Dax Shepard give this example with drifting cars. He says the thing you're trying to avoid, you cannot look at, because if you're looking at it, you end up hitting it. Also with gymnasts, they have a similar thing where, like, if you're trying to learn how to do a flip on a trampoline, you look where you want to go because you move towards what you're paying attention to.
I can't seem to stop looking at it, and it can't stop looking at me.
And this is why, even though it feels counterintuitive, you have to let go of the thing you're giving yourself to, because you move towards what you pay attention to. And if you're trying to hold on and control the outcome of what you're doing, your attention becomes a slave to the circumstances. So if something goes wrong, you're paying attention to it and you start moving towards that thing. And the path you're taking to try to avoid the negative outcome is the path that leads to the negative outcome. You have thousands of subconscious behaviors that make this the case, and you can't outthink them. You can just decide to use your attention wisely. So if you should let go to not let your attention be a slave to your circumstances, what should you pay attention to?
That is the question, isn't it?
Principle number 3. This one's going to be green. Forrest Gump always had a positive expectation for the future. This is almost a comical element in the movie. No matter how dark the situation, he always sees it in a positive light. But this is such an important principle in our lives today. And it's probably the hardest one for people that consider themselves to be intellectual or skeptical to embrace. The reason is, it almost doesn't matter if you believe life has some ultimate meaning or not. If you have a positive expectation of the future, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. To drive this point home, I'm going to use the metaphor of life being like a blank canvas. Your personality and your unique attributes are like colors that you can paint on that canvas with, but just ask yourself the question, what can you paint with what you have? And the answer is thousands and thousands of possibilities. We get stuck in this mindset that we only have one life, and therefore we only have one life story. And we lose sight of all the possibilities of all the different directions our life could take.
And yet we think we know what will happen next.
The reality is there's so many more positive possibilities, also negative possibilities, than you imagine there is. And you see the ones that your expectations prime you to see. There's loads of studies that demonstrate this point, where people will just not see the most obvious things because of their primed expectations. But the one that was the most amazing to me was this study done by Bob Rosenthal. He goes into his lab and arbitrarily puts markers on rat cages saying this is a really smart rat or this is a really dumb rat. Just completely randomly. It's not actually true. Then he has researchers come in to test these rats by trying to teach them to go through a maze. And the thing is, it wasn't even close. The rats that he labeled as smart did almost twice as good as the rats that were labeled as dumb. And you might be thinking, like, how does that even make any sense? The rats don't know what your expectations are. Wow. He was thinking the same thing, so he did a whole bunch of follow-up experiments, and it turns out that if you treat a rat more gently, it actually performs better. And there's a whole bunch of little behaviors that you can do differently that changes the rat's performance in the maze, right? So even though the rat didn't have any conscious awareness of the expectations for it, it still performed better purely based on the expectations that the researchers had for the rats they were working with. So just pause. Think about that for a second. Your expectations not only affect the people around you who you can communicate with, they even affect animals that you can't communicate with. There's an alignment of behavior all the way down that aligns with whatever your expectations are. There's thousands of subconscious behaviors that you exhibit that align with your expectations of what you should see or not see. You can't outthink this system. What you believe about the future changes the results you get.
Unbelievable.
A lot of people, myself included, have this default intellectual hubris that somehow we're outside the system looking in and observing the clockwork of reality. But that's wrong. Being a realist is illusory. Your beliefs are part of the system and they shape your experience. And so if you don't have a positive expectation of the future, you are guaranteed to miss out on amazing opportunities that would change your life. What is Forrest Gump's answer to the meaning of life, the universe, and everything? It's not a philosophical answer, but an approach to how he lived his life that maximized the value he was able to get out of his life.
That's all I have to say about that.
I broke this down into these 3 principles because I feel like it's the most succinct way to describe his approach to life. And if you want a succinct way to remember them, riffing off of Timothy Leary's turn on, tune in, and drop out, I would label these as lean in, let go, and look up. But what is the center of the bullseye that these principles enable? Sticking with our color metaphor, what is the white light that these primaries create? But first, a metaphor. Your experience of life is like wading through a vast river. If you're not leaning into the flow of the river, you lose control and tumble backwards. If you're holding on to the river, if you're trying to stop the river's flow, you lose control and tumble backwards. If you look straight down at the water passing you by, you lose your balance and you lose control and fall backwards. But if you're leaning into the river's flow and you're not trying to stop it but letting it pass you by, and you're looking up at the horizon, you're able to navigate through the river.
Wow! That's amazing!
So the white light here is the ability to navigate through your experiences. So even if you don't think about what the meaning of life is in the grand scheme of things, or you're not sure what you believe about it, if you follow his approach, you will find meaning in your life that's waiting for you to discover it. With this brain teaser, I tried to capture the essence of Forrest Gump's approach to life. And if you want a hint on how to solve it, think about a feather blowing in the wind. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. That would help me very much. I decided that I'm going to only do one a month, and hopefully I can stick to that. It's much harder than I thought it would be. Also, if you want to buy a brain teaser, you can do that at my Shopify store. The link is in the description to this video. And maybe go watch Forrest Gump. Let me know what you get out of it.